This is what college football will look like in 2030. College conferences are an ever-changing landscape, and they make less sense geographically now than they ever have. And that's a trend that's not going anywhere anytime soon. I did this video somewhat recently about what college football will look like in the 2030s, but there's been some changes since then, and there was some pushback on that video. So I got in the lab, I did a little bit more research, and I've come up with a new, realistic view at what college football conferences will look like in 2030. Let's start with the SEC, because these changes make the most sense. Here's what we've got. Texas, Texas A&M, Oklahoma, Missouri, Arkansas, LSU, Mississippi State, Ole Miss, Alabama, Auburn, Florida, Georgia, Vanderbilt, Tennessee, Kentucky, South Carolina, North Carolina, and NC State. There's been a lot of public flirtation between North Carolina and SEC this summer, and some outlets are going as far as saying that there's a secret backdoor deal for the SEC and North Carolina to join forces at some point towards the end of this decade. That is kind of surprising if you're just paying attention to numbers and college football success, but it makes sense with North Carolina because they are a high-end institution. They are somewhat within the SEC footprint. Obviously, it's a bit of an expansion, but it's still a southern state, and this is one of the most successful basketball brands in history. They have a tie-in with Jordan Brand, which is intriguing for SEC, especially with already having Oklahoma in the conference, and that's a big, strong brand that they would like to get into their footprint. And North Carolina has had some success in college football. They're not a pushover. And what makes this more interesting to me, and really what pushed me to make this video, is the recent changes to the SEC schedule, announcing that they're going to go to the 9-game schedule with the changes that the College Football Playoff announced to how they're looking at strength of schedule. And I think that North Carolina and NC State as kind of a tie-in kind of have to go with them. I think that's what's going to end up happening. Makes sense for an SEC schedule because there's only so many top-end teams that you can add, right? Texas, Oklahoma being the last two. I think that those make the schedule more difficult for an SEC team. I think that teams like North Carolina and NC State, while they're not hurting your strength of schedule greatly, because they are going to be good teams in some seasons, and they are going to be strong basketball teams, and they are going to perform well in baseball and other things that the SEC does, they're not going to be these teams where you circle North Carolina on your schedule every single season, or you circle NC State in your schedule every single season. So it kind of is perfect for both of them because North Carolina and NC State, to a degree, want to get away from the ACC as they see that's the sinking ship towards the end of this next decade. But the SEC doesn't want to go out and add these top-end programs. They're going to make their top-end programs have more difficult paths down the road. So that's why I think North Carolina and NC State, kind of as an add-in, are the perfect Goldilocks effect. And it goes in with the SEC. As we've seen, they've been more selective with the teams that they've added and want to keep a southern, footprint as opposed to, places like the ACC, like the Big 12, and like the Big 10 that have kind of not really cared so much about geographics and just cared about getting the best schools that they could possibly add to their conference. Speaking of the Big 10, this is a crazy one, and I'll explain it more afterwards, but let's just go through what we've got here. So we got Washington, Oregon, Cal, Stanford, UCLA, USC, Utah, Colorado, Nebraska, Iowa, Minnesota, Wisconsin, Northwestern, Illinois, Indiana, Purdue, Michigan, Michigan State, Ohio State, Penn State, Rutgers, Maryland, Virginia, Virginia Tech, Clemson, and Florida State. This is a 26-team college football conference, and I know that is insane, but I think what the Big Ten has been doing is insane. They floated out there the idea of a 24 or 28-team playoff, and it made me think, for a while, I've been thinking that the Big Ten and the SEC are kind of in lockstep. They're kind of, going to make the changes together, and they're eventually going to merge into one kind of super conference. But I think that the Big Ten is trying to do their own thing. I don't think that the Big Ten sees themselves as equals with the SEC, and we know for a fact that the SEC does not see themselves as equal to the Big Ten. I think we're moving more towards rival college football institutions, conferences, leagues, whatever it is, as opposed to Big Ten and the SEC coming together and kicking everybody else out of college football. And this is a perfect example of what they're thinking here. They need a national footprint. They made the craziest move to go get USC and UCLA. They made another crazy move to go get Oregon and Washington, where we have USC playing Rutgers. These are insane moves. But everything after that is less insane, right? It obviously makes sense to add Cal and Stanford. It obviously makes sense to add Utah and Colorado. If you already have those West Coast schools, you're filling in your map a little bit. And they have made it known that they're interested in expanding into the South as well. They're interested in Clemson. They're interested in Florida State. They're very interested in Virginia. They're damn near at the level of UNC and SEC with the flirtation they've had with Virginia and kind of the almost guaranteed nature that we've seen with Virginia coming to the Big Ten. I think that Virginia Tech is kind of an add-on to that in the same way that NC State is. But this is a crazy idea that doesn't seem so crazy after the summer that we've had, after all this expansion talk that we've had. And again, I don't think that the Big Ten sees themselves as the equal of anybody in college football. And I think that they, even as a team, as a fan of a team in the Big Ten, I think that the most evil force in college football right now is the Big Ten. I think that they see dollar signs more than anybody else, and they will chase that more than anybody else. I think that the SEC, while they have definitely a drive towards money, culture is a big thing in the South with football, and I think that they dilute their product more than anybody if they go outside of that. The Big Ten has no culture that's holding them together. At this point, there's no culture that's holding them together. Ohio, Michigan, there's no cultural kind of thing that comes together with their football and football in Oregon or football in LA. It's just that they're good college football programs. That's it. And the LA programs are not called good college football programs. But they've lost all cultural identity. And I don't think that they are trying to get it back. I think that they're trying to go for a more corporate structure. And this is an example of that. And I would not be surprised if leading up to the next media rights deal, if the Big Ten is trying to get all they can get out of the college football playoff, and if they push for something that's completely different, not even in line with playing with the rest of the conferences, just a Big Ten playoff in and of itself. I would not be surprised if that happens in the next decade. I don't think that you should be either, and I don't think that this map that we've got on the screen now is going to be a surprising thing to see in the next 5 years. Now, there's two conferences that get hit quite a bit from the last two maps we've seen, but there's one obvious loser, and that's the ACC. Here's what they're going to look like after getting gutted by the top two conferences. It's going to go Miami, USF, UCF, Georgia Tech, Wake Forest, Duke, James Madison, Cincinnati, Pitt, Syracuse, UConn as a football only, and BC. I'll probably get some pushback on this one, but I think that the ACC is going to find themselves scratching and clawing to stay afloat as a conference after they start to get rated. I think that they are positioned poorly right now. There's a little bit too much kind of spread out across the country, not really ties to money. There's just not a real thing going on in the ACC because they took those Big East teams, because they took some of the Pac-12 teams, because they brought in SMU, because of all the things that they've kind of conglomerated together. The core of the ACC is the most valuable part, and the core of the ACC, the Florida States, the Clemsons, the UNCs, the UVAs, they're the ones trying to leave. So if they're the ones trying to leave, what's holding the rest of it all together? And you can see that they're going to have some other pieces that are chipped off here. But I think they're going to have to push for some more Florida teams after they lose Florida State. So they'll try to get UCF out of the Big 12, and they'll try to bring the USF up, I think, from the American where they're at right now. Obviously, they're going to try their best to hold on to the two private North Carolina institutions. You could definitely see Duke moving over to the SEC. I don't think that they will. I think that they will not follow UNC. The rivalry in basketball, I don't think, is big enough to change conferences like that, but we'll see. Wake Forest also is another private institution from North Carolina. I don't know exactly how all those schools are going to interact with each other when it comes to conferences, but I would just say the two private schools and the two public schools are probably going to move together if they do end up moving. James Madison is an interesting one. I thought that they would want to keep something in Virginia. It's one of the more populated states in their footprint, so I would think that they want to keep something in Virginia. Maybe it's not James Madison. Maybe they find a way to hold on to Virginia Tech. but I would say they're probably going to have to pull somebody up if they want to stay in Virginia as a conference. Cincinnati is another one I think doesn't necessarily make so much sense in the Big 12. I think that they could pull them away and kind of have a more, because they're going to have a more northern footprint. Maybe they don't, but I think that they could entice Cincy to move away. I think there's going to be some trades between the ACC and the Big 12. And then, of course, they're going to keep these Northeastern schools, Pitt, Syracuse, BC, and they'll bring in UConn as a football only. I think that UConn is kind of floating around like BYU was for a while, but BYU is I think, a stronger brand. Notre Dame is going to stay independent. BYU could have stayed independent for longer, but I think that UConn, they're obviously care more about being in the Big East. They will stay in the Big East. If someone offers them a football only deal, they will take it. And I think that the ACC is going to get desperate in football, and UConn is a strong enough brand that give them the football only deal and go from there, as opposed to, forcing them out of the Big East, which is obviously the most important thing to them for college basketball. The other side of the conferences that got shafted is the Big 12. So let's take a look at that. We've got Arizona, Arizona State, BYU, Iowa State, Kansas, Kansas State, Oklahoma State, Texas Tech, SMU, Baylor, TCU, Houston, Tulane, Memphis, Louisville, and West Virginia. I thought about West Virginia going to the ACC and staying with Louisville, or Louisville coming over. I thought ultimately that West Virginia has been in the Big 12 for a long time, has gone through quite a few changes to the Big 12, and they've stuck around. So I think that they are going to stay there, and they're going to be they're going to be one of those decision-making members of the Big 12 because of how long they've been there. Louisville, I think, is a strong enough brand that they will want to take them. If they're going to lose UCF, which I could definitely see, if they're going to lose Cincy, which I could definitely see, Louisville is a strong brand that kind of fits with the Big 12 because they are a strong basketball school with a good football program. And this conference is a crazy basketball conference when you start to look at it. The Arizona schools, Louisville, the Kansas, you're really looking at a super strong basketball conference here, West Virginia in certain years as well. So that's why I think they're going to be able to pull in Louisville. I think that Tulane and Memphis, kind of the two most valuable schools in the American. I know that Memphis has tried to get into the Big 12. They're maybe going to go, both these teams could also go to the Pac-12, but I do think that eventually, because of all the movement and because of losing Colorado and Utah, in my opinion, they're going to have to maybe stoop a little bit lower and bring some schools up, which we saw them do this last realignment cycle with Houston, with UCF, and with Cincinnati. And then SMU. I think that SMU has proven their value. I think that what the Big 12 has going for it is Texas, and I think they're going to try to continue to kind of button down on Texas, and SMU has proven to be a sleeping giant that has awoken with all the money that's come into the program, the success they had last season in college football. I think that the other Christian institutions in Texas will take note of that and will want to bring them into the fold in the Big 12. I think this is still a very good conference, and I think that they end up in a better spot than the ACC does because they really were on the brink of going the way of the Big East, going the way of the Pac-12 this last cycle, and they found a way to keep it going. The first season has been promising for them, and I think that you could see some improvement, but there seems to be a strong identity of what the Big 12 is in its current state, and I would imagine that they're going to remain strong in the next realignment cycle. And the last one we're going to talk about is the Pac-12. Obviously, because I'm from Pac-12 country, I want to talk about them, and I think it's interesting what has happened over the last couple months to make this the Pac-8 now. And I think that there's some interesting stories to talk about with this. So let's go through it. Washington State, Oregon State, San Jose State, Fresno State, San Diego State, UNLV, Nevada, Boise State, Montana, Montana State, Wyoming, Utah State, Colorado State, Air Force, New Mexico State, UTEP, and Texas State. The biggest story that no one is talking about in conference realignment right now, no one outside of the Pac-12 and the Mountain West, is the Pac-12 and the Mountain West suing the hell out of each other and trying to figure out, what happened. Now, let's be honest, the Pac-12 backstabbed the hell out of Mountain West when the Mountain West offered them a lifeline last season in a scheduling agreement, and then they turn around and they poach Boise State, they poach Fresno State, they poach San Diego State, and they poach Utah State from the Mountain West, and now they're suing the hell out of each other. But I think through all of this suing and everything, what's eventually going to happen is they're all going to become the Pac-12. The Pac-12 is a stronger brand. The Mountain West obviously still wants to have some control, but the Pac-12 is not going to survive very long if they're going to start going after Tulane. They're going to start going after Memphis. They're going to start going after UConn. They're going to start pulling teams up from out of nowhere. And there's just not that many teams out west. I don't think it's realistic that they're going to go get Cal and Stanford. I thought it was last time. I did some more research. It's not. They're not going to go get Cal or Stanford. They're not going to be able to pull them back into the fold. And you cannot expand this too big. You cannot do a nationwide conference if you're not a power conference. If you're going to be getting a CW deal, you cannot use CW money to make a national conference. You need to keep it more tight. And I think that the idea is you just get all the teams out west and put them together. You might not agree that Montana State are going to move up, but I think that there is an audience for it. I think that it would be very interesting. I think it connects everything together. The only Western school that Western state that they're missing is Arizona, which maybe they pull up Northern Arizona. Maybe they pull up Grand Canyon, which I think is what's kind of happening in the Mountain West right now. But I would imagine there's a lot of schools in the Pac-12 that would not want the Grand Canyon University in their conference. But I think that, survival is going to be the most important thing. And through all this suing, through all the hurt feelings, through all the contracts and whatever agreements that were broken from this conference realignment, the understanding is going to be, look, do we want there to be a Western Conference in college football, in top-tier college football? Do we want a conference that represents the Western states in top-tier college football? If we do, we must come together and make this work. Maybe this one doesn't happen in 2030. Maybe it's a couple years after that, this full conference. But I do think that eventually, in the next 5 to 10 seasons, we're going to see something like this come together out of necessity. The teams might be pissed about it, but at the end of the day, this conference in college football, with what we've seen from Boise State over the years, Washington State and Oregon State, obviously very strong brands. Air Forces can carry some. UNLV seems to be on their way up. Maybe not so much after week 0, but getting a couple Texas schools in there. I think just the strength of all this together, you can get some games in prime time. Maybe you can get a Boise State, Oregon State game in prime time with Boise State, Washington State. Like there's some ways to make this work, and maybe you're not a power conference, probably not a power conference, but you can put a stranglehold on that last playoff spot or 2 of the G5, G6 playoff spots, depending on whatever happens next. Or if it all gets blown up, you can try to work with the Big 12 with this. You could try to work with the ACC and make something of a second division if the Big 10 and the SEC go off and do something else. But if you break up the West, if you continue to break up the West between the Pac-12 and the Mountain West without having these top-tier schools, the top California schools, the Ducks, Washington, Colorado, Utah, BYU, if you don't have those schools, the Arizona schools, if you don't have those schools to work with, you can't break up the rest of the schools. You cannot have 2 small Western divisions. It needs to be one big Western division if you really want to survive in top-tier college football. As for the rest of the G5, I have no idea. Who knows what conferences are going to survive? Who knows what conferences are going to merge? I think that the Sun Belt will probably survive and the MAC will probably survive. Who knows who's going to get pulled up? I mean, we've had 12 teams added to the FBS level over the last 10 years or whatever it is. So I think that the main thing here is that college football is going to continue to change, and I think that it's not going to necessarily be our favorite thing. But at this point, what can we do to stop it? As long as there continues to be national college football and we continue to see some of our favorite teams, that's all we can ask for. I don't know. They tried to make a super league in Europe and they protested until it went away. I don't know if that works in America, but maybe that's what it's going to come to, or maybe we have to all stop watching college football for it to come back to anything that we remember. But regardless of what we think, because it doesn't necessarily matter what we think nowadays, obviously, with the way things are moving, this is what I think it can most likely look like in 2030. Thanks for watching that video. Make sure that you like and subscribe, and if you made it this far, leave a comment, let me know what you think. What conferences did I get right? Which conferences did I get wrong? And maybe what teams are going to be pulled up from FCS in the next couple of years. I don't know that so much, so maybe you can let me know and see if there's any schools that you think are going to be moving up to the top level in the next couple of years. If you want to watch more of my videos, I do have those for you. On this side, I got my video that I came out with yesterday. It's a game preview of Texas, Ohio State that'll be coming this Saturday. So check that out if you want to check. If you're interested, up here I've got my other version of this video, what college football will look like in 2030. So see what you think about that one and maybe compare the two. Other than that, I've got my subscribe link on this side, and we will check you next time. See ya.